Welcome back to the second episode of the CRE Hustle. I have an honor to be sitting next to David Beshears with Beshears Associates. They are a commercial appraisal and real estate services company. So David, great to have you here.
Great to be here, Brandon.
Awesome. So for the ones who maybe don't know about you or aren't in the commercial real estate space, or they haven't, maybe they're looking to get into commercial real estate, tell them a little bit about yourself.
I have been doing this for 33 years and I graduated from the Florida State real estate program, and my first job was in valuation, and then I worked in brokerage in capital markets group at Cushman & Wakefield for about 3 years. Kind of got washed out in the last real estate crash, which was back in the RTC days in the early 90s, late 80s, and then got back into valuation. I have been doing this on my own since 1994 is when I started Beshears Associates. So this is actually our 25th year,
Wow.
which we're excited about.
Mm-hmm.
And we appraise commercial properties throughout Florida and the Southeast. About 80% of our work is here on the west coast of Florida, and we do a lot of self-storage, gas stations, hotels, mobile home parks, and then all the stuff, retail, office, industrial. So
Very good, very good. And then what's one thing that you enjoy doing outside of commercial real estate? Hobbies or for
Well,
fun?
I have 4 kids, most of which are college age, so I don't really have much time for hobbies. I think one of the things I've enjoyed the most over the past couple of years is being able to go to Haiti with both construction and medical teams and do some work over there. We were supposed to go this past summer, but because of the problems, we weren't able to go. Mm-hmm. But that's probably, I would say, of anything that I have a hobby or a passion for outside of running a small business and doing this is helping people in Haiti.
Wow. Yeah, awesome. That's great. How long have you been doing that for?
We've been doing it for like 4 years, and as I said, we've made 2 trips. We were supposed to make another trip this past summer, but there's a lot of political unrest going on right now, so it's really not safe to travel.
Right.
So anyway, but we're hoping to get back over there soon.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So
I know that you're in, retail, industrial, right, multifamily, all of that. So just speak. I know that what makes your firm so great is the fact that you have so many different people working in different areas and specialties and whatnot. So speak on what you're comfortable with. I know a big topic right now is multifamily, right? And it seems like everyone wants to get into it, especially for investment. So if you're comfortable with talking with that, maybe briefly kind of go over how you see commercial real estate changing, maybe multifamily, the different trends that you see going on right now.
yeah, I think there's obviously things are changing. I've been doing this for 33 years. We've seen concepts come and go. When I first got started, all Eckards and Walgreens were in line next to a Publix, or a Winn-Dixie,
Mm-hmm.
and I saw that trend where everything went out to the corner, and and then they built these drugstores everywhere, and that became quite a phenomenon. And then now we're seeing those drugstores shrink again, and they're starting to close, and they're starting to say, okay, well, we've got a Walgreens on this corner, and 3 miles away we got a Walgreens on this corner. Let's close those 2 and put 1. So we're starting to see that trend. Just in my career, we've seen that trend change dramatically. Bank branches, we've seen bank branches go from exploding and wanting to be everywhere, and every single bank wanting to expand, to now we're seeing the banks contract. Right. And a lot of that has to do with the internet. I think everybody says the internet. It's technology in general.
Right.
But the internet is certainly the driver behind that. And so I think the internet has and the technology has such a tremendous impact on all of business, and of course anything that has impact on business is going to have impact on commercial real estate. You know, that is going to continue to be a tremendous trend, and it affects just about every product type. Obviously, it has the most impact on retail and industrial, and I'll kind of get into some of those. But I think the other trend that at least in Florida we have the benefit of is our tremendous population growth and employment growth. And we're the second fastest growing state in the country in terms of just sheer population growth, not percentage wise, but just pure numbers. And we're growing faster than California, which is just kind of crazy, because California forever was the state. I remember early on in my career, and I've looked for this article, I can't find it, but back when I was working for Cushman & Wakefield back in the late 80s, Florida Trend had an article, and it said Florida was, look to our future, look to California, because we were 30 years behind California. And it listed all these different reasons why, we were going to mirror California's growth projection. And I really feel that's happened, and it's stunning at this point that we're actually adding significantly more people than California at this point, despite the fact that that state is so much larger than us. Florida's population growth and employment growth are creating just a myriad of opportunities. And yes, we're going to be heavily weighted towards people my age and older, moving here. But generally those folks moving here, they're still very active. They typically have some resources and some money, and that creates just a multiplier effect of other jobs for people who are much earlier on in their career. So I think as we continue to see this population shift, from the Northeast and from the Midwest to Florida, and also to other southeastern states, but Florida obviously is going to be the number one. You're going to see a tremendous amount of opportunity, I think, in all product sectors. It's almost like there was already happening. That was already just organically going to happen because of people's age and the baby boom population. But then when with the impact of the tax structure of the Northeast, and with the tax law changes, which made it even more punitive, now you're seeing, I think that was just throwing gasoline on the fire. And so now you're seeing that, and what's made a lot of that, happen, or that gets back to the whole technology issue, because you're seeing in Palm Beach County in particular, you're seeing all of these wealth funds and wealth managers, move their operations. At first it was kind of like, okay, I'm in Stamford, Connecticut, but I'm going to have an office in Palm Beach because all of my clients are down, wintering in Palm Beach or Boca or, that area. So I'm going to be down there. And now it's a shift to, why am I in Stamford, Connecticut? I don't need to be up there. I don't need to be near New York City because I can do everything in Palm Beach that I could do there. And so you're seeing this tremendous shift of businesses move down, and that's all being made available by technology. Technology is a huge disruptor in the retail sector. I don't see that changing. I think there's a lot of people want to believe that some of these stores are going to need some bricks and retail, and I think they're going to, and I think you've seen that, but kind of a move towards that. But it's going to be a completely different look than what we've had the last 20 or 30 years. And you're seeing the old line retailers that just couldn't keep up in that environment. They go out of business. And so I think retail is going to continue to get turned on its ear. We're seeing the drugstore shrink. We're seeing, again, get back to technology. At one time, one of the biggest money makers for CVS and Walgreens was photo processing. Wrap your head around that. I have 10 employees today. When I had 4 employees, when I was starting my appraisal firm back in the 90s, we spent $1,000 a month at CVS on photo processing. Okay, for my little company. Okay, today I spend zero. So just that technology has just completely changed, and that was a huge profit center and a huge demand driver for the drugstores, because it got people to come into the store, pick up their photos, and while they were there, they were going to pick up X, Y, and Z. Well, that's gone. And now we're starting to see the shift towards the online delivery of drugs and pharmaceuticals. And so you wonder, what's their niche going to be? How are they going to drive people into the store? And also the other thing that's happened to the drugstore industry during that same time frame was, that they became mini grocery stores. Well, now you've got the Dollar Tree and Dollar General and Family Dollar, and they've moved into that space. And so, where are the drugstores, which were so dominant in the 90s and 2000s? Where are they going to carve out a unique niche? If they don't have photo processing, they may lose their monopoly on prescription drugs, and they're losing their ability to be the affordable convenient grocer, because there's so many Dollar Trees, Family Dollars, Dollar Generals, and even the convenience stores with Wawa's. Those guys, have stepped up their game. So you can go into Wawa's and you can buy a lot of what you need for groceries just for that night at a Wawa's or a 7-Eleven or a racetrack. Because when Wawa's came into the market, they forced racetrack and Circle K and 7-Eleven to up their game. And so when those guys came in, it forced the other guys to up their game. And so again, you had everybody competing for that same, we're selling gasoline, but they don't really make any money selling gasoline. They make all their money on inside sales. A typical gas station makes 4% on their gallonage sales. Wow. So basically 4 cents on every dollar for gas, but they make 30 cents plus inside, depending upon what they sell. Some of the stuff they're making 50-60% margins. So that's why you see the focus of those, of the Wawas and the 7-Elevens and the Circle Ks and the racetracks. They want to drive people to their stores with cheap gas, and they want to get them inside so that they can get other things. But again, that all gets into that consumer dollar, and so that's a dramatic change, in retail. And banking's the same way. Why you've seen now with the banking, Chase being the one exception that I can think of, but every other bank, they aren't building new branches. Right. They're closing branches, and they don't need the 4,000 square foot branch anymore. Technology has not only do they not need the amount of real estate. In a lot of cases, they don't need the real estate, because also what they really care about is having that dot on the map. So when somebody pulls up on a phone and they look for a Wells Fargo, whether it's a actual bricks and sticks branch that's costing them $1 million plus a year to operate, or whether it's a little kiosk in a Winn-Dixie parking lot, it shows up the same on the internet as a dot. And that's what they really care about. And so we're going to see a complete shift where we are seeing a complete shift in the banking industry as they move away from these bricks and sticks branches and really consolidate their footprints. They want to have as many dots on the map, but they don't necessarily want to have open stores or banks. And so that's another shift. So I think retail is going to lead the way. I mean, big box. Everybody talks about big box, and big box is tough. That's a concept that's really, and we do appraisals a lot, and where you have these vacant big boxes, and you're kind of like, what's going to go there? Right. What concept is going to come along and take this product? And 10, 15 years ago, you could name a half dozen different groups that were expanding, and now you're kind of like, I don't know. Who's going to come in and take this? And so, everybody knows on the big box side that that's everybody talks about that. There's been a lot of news on that, but I think that's very real. the demand for big box is just not, it's going to continue to decline. I mean, even some of the bigger players that have been trying to successfully navigate, like Best Buy,
right.
You see them shrinking their footprints down significantly. So, I think retail is probably going to get the brunt of it in terms of negative, because you're going to continue to see the shrinkage in retail, and you're going to continue to see that technology is going to, people are going to be able to order things online and get it delivered the next day. That is going to have a significant impact on retail going forward. That said, that what's the benefit? Well, there's always going to be a benefactor to that. I mean, industrial obviously is exploding because of all the delivery. And I don't know that we always hear the buzzword, last mile delivery, and I don't know that that's been 100% perfected. A lot of people argue that a vacant Walgreens or a vacant bank would make a great last mile delivery, and it would be expensive. I mean, those are expensive boxes to turn into de facto warehouses, but they're all very well located, and they typically have a relatively large parking field, which you would need to get groups in and out of there. So is that going to be something that go forward? So I think industrial is going to continue to evolve. The older industrial is going to have a harder time because it just wasn't built for this age of that's why we're starting to see new industrial being constructed. In my career, we did very little proposed new construction on industrial, and now you're seeing that, and I think a lot of that is being driven by our shift in the way that we're looking at logistics, in the way that we're looking at just-in-time inventory, and people are becoming accustomed to I can order it in the morning, it's going to be on my doorstep at night, and that's a complete shift. I remember growing up, and when I was growing up, it was just going out of style, and we never had it. But there were some people who still had their milk delivered by the dairy truck. This was the late '60s, early '70s, and the dairy truck would still go around the neighborhood and deliver to some people the milk and eggs. And you'd see Charles Chips, the chip, and they would come and and that was like we all kind of thought that was weird, but it was just kind of a left over from a different era when people back in the '50s, and people didn't have 2 cars, 3 cars per household. They had 1 car per household, and so they didn't have the ability to get out and get that if somebody had the 1 car at work. And so that was kind of a vestige of a earlier age, and now we've come 360 degrees where we're right back to it, where people are expecting everything to be delivered, and so I think that that alone is going to be a tremendous trend. And the other thing that is kind of interesting to me is office, and I think office is obviously
a bunch of co-working space.
You have big co-working space. And obviously they're having some problems. I do know that the co-working is that's a very popular concept. I'm relatively bullish on office, because the right kind of office, because particularly in the Tampa Bay area, because we have such tremendous population growth and employment growth. When I was a broker at Cushman back in the late '80s, and they would tell us you need 400 square feet per person if you're doing a professional services, if you're doing a law firm, you're doing the other. That has shrunk. Now we're down to like 100 square feet per person, and that has happened over the last 30 years, mainly because of technology. I mean, the big law firms in downtown Tampa, every one of them had a law library that might take up an entire floor. Well, none of them need that now. They don't need a law library, because they can, it's much more effective to have it on your individual computer. And you don't need the administrative help, because a lot of the attorneys do their own typing, or they do a lot of the editing. So technology has totally changed, not just in law firms, but just about every type of service, or in office using employment. But I think we've seen that shrinkage come down to about as far down as it can get. I mean, 100 square feet, that's pretty tight. You know, you squeeze people much tighter than that. It's pretty tight. And I think you're actually starting to see a pushback. You know, people are kind of going, okay, you know, it's great, this open office concept, but, you know, I want a place I can get away, you know. And so I think we're down to about as far down as we can shrink that. And so over the past 30 years, you know, we haven't seen a single office building, a Class A office tower built in downtown Tampa since 1991.
Wow.
Okay, so and there's been precious little built in West Shore. There's been precious little built on the Parkway. When we do appraisals, I know almost everything we look at is going to have been built in the 80s. You know, because that was the big boom. A few things built in the 90s, but just about everything built in the 80s. Now we have the demand. We have the office using employment coming in. And because of technology, we can do things in Tampa, Florida, just as well as they can do them anywhere else in the world. And so, you know, I think I'm relatively bullish on office. I think we're going to see, and you've seen it in the rates. We've seen the vacancy rates come down. We've seen the rental rates go up. It's finally getting to a point on the Class A plus end where it's feasible to build new construction. That's not the case with B and C product. Most of the B and C product is still going in the $100 to $130 a foot, $140 a foot range, and that's still way below what it costs to build. You know, even plain vanilla, you know, office is still going to, you know, you're still going to be pushing, bumping, you know, the plainest office. By the time you buy the land, do the site improvements, and build the building, you're going to be bumping up at $200 plus a foot. So we're still way below replacement cost on B and C grade office. But the A plus stuff, you know, the showcase stuff, that is, and you're starting to see the construction of that. You're starting to see it up in Riverside Heights and Armature Works. You're seeing it over in the West Shore market. You know, you're seeing it at the Midtown site there. So you know, I think office, we are primed to get some you know, Class A office, and you know, the concern that technology is going to impact, or you know, people shrinking down the office. We've been doing that for 30 years. I think we're done with that. I think now it's time to build some Class A office. We can't build too much of it because it's, you know, Tampa Bay area. You know, while we have good job growth, you know, we're not a headquarters city, and we're not going to get, you know, the same number of office using jobs, but there is a demand for office. So, you know, those are the trends I see. I mean, that you know, going on right now. Self-storage is something that, you know, we've done a lot of self-storage. We've done over 150 self-storage facilities in the past 3 years. We've seen a lot of new development in that. And that is being driven obviously by the population growth. Do you
think that that's because of people going from, you know, buying a house to renting, say, an apartment or something, and now they need those storage units? Because I think I read somewhere that, I mean, there's like as much storage units, I think, as like McDonald's and like Wendy's or something, like combined. I forget what it was, but
well, there's a tremendous number of storage units. I mean, and people who live in apartments generally, you know, there's very little storage there, and but you know, one of the things we found is, because we've done a number of feasibility studies on these, apartments is a demand driver for self storage, but residential housing is a bigger demand driver. Okay, so and if you have people who are moving here from the Midwest, from the Northeast, and they have basements, and we don't have basements, so they have to put their stuff somewhere, and you know, so generally you're gonna, I think we've built a whole lot of self-storage in a short amount of time. I think, you know, there's kind of a pause right now. We're not seeing as much developed. Everybody's waiting to get everything absorbed, but you know, I think self-storage is going to continue to be a very attractive option, and you know, one of the primary reasons is people will get upset if their apartment rent goes up from $1,500 a month to $1,600 a month, you know, which is much less than a 10% increase. They'll get upset and move. They'll move themselves. They'll spend a weekend moving themselves. You can jack their self-storage rent up from $150 to $175, and they'll be upset about it, you know. but they're not going to spend a weekend to get all the junk out of that self-storage unit and move it across town to a cheaper unit. So percentage-wise, you can get much higher increases in self-storage than you can in multifamily. Also, most of the apartment, and some different apartment complexes and different ages vary, but generally your typical apartment tenant is going to stay with you about 3 years. Your typical self-storage tenant is going to stay with you 8 years. Wow. Again, people put their stuff in there, and 90% of them, that they believe it's valuable for some reason, but they never want to see it again. So they lock it in there and they leave. And so, from an investment standpoint, self-storage is a tremendous asset class. And I think we're going to continue to see it develop. I think right now everybody's kind of taking a pause, but I think you're going to continue to see it. The other thing with self-storage is we've gone from having an environment that was largely non-air conditioned, non-climate controlled, and to this, and the old business model of self-storage was, let's buy some valuable land that's kind of on the outskirts, and we're going to put up steel modular structures that we can take down easily that don't cost much, and we're going to land bank this. Okay, and that was kind of the underlying, that was the value play on self-storage, and so what we've, what you're seeing now are these 5-story, climate-controlled buildings that they've paid a lot of money for, and obviously the long-term land banking is out the door, but that also has set the standard for what people demand in the self-storage space, and people want to borrow something, from a Hemingway novel, they want a clean and well-lighted place. They want it to be clean, they want it to be secure, they want to feel like if they're there at night at 7 o'clock unloading boxes, that it's not scary. Right. Okay, and so what that has done is it's made the older products somewhat obsolete, or has at least pushed it down, to a level that it's not as competitive as the new stuff. And that's happening, the obsolescence issue. I mean, you were talking about office. So many of the offices that we appraise, the biggest problem is parking. Again, when that was built in the 80s, it was built for 300 to 400 square feet per person. Right. They had 3 parking spaces, 4 parking spaces per 1,000. Well, you may need 8 to 10 parking spaces per 1,000 to be competitive today. So that's one of the biggest issues with office is not that you can't take a 1970s vintage building and make it cool and make it work in today's environment. But if you don't have the parking, you've got a real problem. And that's another emerging trend that we're seeing. It's just the whole Uber rideshare thing, and and how that's impacting. I mean, when we don't do that many bars and restaurants, but when we do them, and particularly like in the South Howard district over here, that was always a big problem for them, was parking. We recently did an office building over here off of Howard, and one of their additional revenue sources was parking leases with restaurants, and so they lease their parking lot at night to restaurants. And I asked the owner, I said, well, is that a maintenance issue for you? He goes, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, it was. They would flood the parking lot on the weekends. They'd leave all kinds of stuff. He said, now, he goes, they never use it. They never use it. They have to have it to comply with zoning, because they have to have so many parking spaces. They said, but they don't use it because the bars and restaurants, everybody's doing ride sharing, everybody's doing Uber. They don't need the parking anymore. And so again, that's another trend that's changing the real estate environment. I was 5 years out of school and thought I was on my way, and then the market crashed. And I think that was probably the biggest challenge I've had in my career. In which direction do I want to head? And I knew I wanted to stay in the real estate industry. So I think that was the biggest challenge for me. I ended up going in a direction actually I didn't really plan to go into. I got into the appraisal into the business, but that's been a great place to be. But yeah, so that's probably my biggest challenge. I mean, the other big challenge was just was the last crash we had, 2008 to 2012. It was just extremely painful for everybody, and it was painful for our business. So that is, from running a small business, that was a very painful time, and you had to shrink everything down, I really hope that we don't go through that again in my career, and I don't think we will. I think that was probably a 1 in 100 year type of a crash, but it was painful, so hopefully that doesn't happen again anytime soon. I think we will have recessions. Obviously, there's been business cycles, but in my career, there's been 2 really bad real estate downturns, the one, the RTC, late 80s, and then the one from 2008 on. There have been a number of recessions, but they haven't had that type of impact on real estate. But those 2 had really far-reaching. I think the Appraisal Institute published something, a while back that there was bigger value declines during those 2 events than during the Great Depression for commercial real estate. So that kind of puts in perspective. Those were 100-year kind of events, and we had 2 of them, in that 30-year cycle. So hopefully that doesn't happen again. So
yeah. Well, is there any indicators as far as why that was and why it hit commercial so hard?
Well, I mean, we led the market. We led the market into a recession this past time around. There was just crazy lending. Regulations were extremely lax on the residential lending side. That caused the collateralized mortgage-backed security market to collapse on the residential side. I think one of the things that at least I was blind to, because we did a lot of the CMBS work on the commercial side, was that the residential market would take down the commercial market. I think everybody viewed those as 2 totally separate markets, and they didn't think that when the residential market collapsed and it took down so many of the banks and it took down all of the BP spires for the CMBS market, at least I didn't equate that would also be taking down the BP spires and the banks for the commercial. And I think generally commercial was not grossly overbuilt like it was in the RTC days, late 80s. That was just pure overbuilding. Just crazy overbuilding. I don't think we overbuilt the market based upon where we thought the residential market. So all these shopping centers were built because there were subdivisions and the houses were selling. We just didn't know nobody was going to live in the houses. They were being speculated. So I don't think the commercial real estate market got tremendously overbuilt. It just we became very dependent on growth as an industry. And I think I remember doing an appraisal for a big group out of New York, and it was down in Fort Myers, and it was an office building, and they said, well, this property's always performed really well for us, and now it's 70% vacant. What's your opinion of that? I said, well, look at the previous rent roll. And I just named them off. It was a big home builder had been in there. It was an engineering firm. It was a title company. It was a realtor. And I'm like, everybody in this building was associated with the housing industry. And that collapsed. And so that took all those jobs and all that demand with it. And so, again, I think everybody's very cautious this time around, and so I don't think we're going to see that type of irrational exuberance on the the development side. At least I hope not. I hope we've learned our lesson, and we don't see that. So
okay. And then for someone wanting to pursue a career in commercial real estate, maybe they're in college or they're out of college, what's one piece of advice that you can give them?
One piece.
Even whether it's like figuring out, because I think this was like a huge question in FSU was, do I go into development? Do I go into appraisal? Do I go into brokerage? Do I go into investment sales?
Yeah, I think I don't know if I can distill it into one piece of advice, but I think that you need to figure out, and it's hard to figure out when you're 22, 23 years old. I know people who are my age who don't know what they want to do. So, but where do you think your strengths are, and what interests you? I mean, you had John Crossman on before me, and what John and I do are totally different. John is about management and sales, and really leasing and being and having that sales, and that's a totally different skill set than on the analytical side, and so I always, when I go to talk at FSU and stuff, I always say, and just because you start on one road doesn't mean you can't change.
Right.